Ireland is at full employment. It's great for the economy, but a real challenge for small and medium businesses who are trying to retain their talent. Whether you're trying to fill new roles or keep the people in the roles you already have, it can feel like a never-ending battle. You spend time and money training people up, only to have them poached away by large multinationals who can offer higher salaries and shinier perks. In this webinar, we hope to offer 10 tips for how you can thrive with fewer people and maybe even turn having a smaller team into a real competitive advantage.
I want to talk about a company, Brightworks. It's not a real company, but this is a collection of things that we have seen and helped clients with that have really made a difference, all put together into this company. So I just want you to think about this company for a minute. It's a precision manufacturing company, but think about your own company. This company has 85 staff. Over the last 12 months, it reduced to 65, mainly due to people leaving. And each of the 10 points is like a turning point in some of what they had to do to be more successful. So think on a Monday morning, orders are piling up. They're down that 25% of staff. And the CEO has just heard there's 2 more resignations happening. So that's immediate, have to do something about it. They have a handful of long-serving staff members who are the core of what they do. They know how things are done. And then they have a lot of people that need a little more direction. Those people that are there a long time are a little cynical about changes and new technologies. So it's hard to make change happen, mainly because they're scared that, they won't be able to perform, or the knowledge that they had in the past won't be as useful. Tariffs are playing havoc with their markets, and a big chunk of their business is in jeopardy through the tariffs and the uncertainty that's happening. They also have a little bit of a problem with their systems, in that they have an old IT system, an ERP system that they depend on, but the IT provider is no longer going to support it. They're kind of, in a way, thankful that ESG isn't on the agenda every day these days. Sustainability was another thing to worry about, and we should still be worrying about it. But with all these other things, it keeps getting pushed back. So you're all living some version of that or other. And what we want to do is just talk about 10 things that we think, you might be able to pick 1 or 2 of them and say, actually, we could do something about that. And that's what we're offering today. So that's Brightworks in a nutshell. And I'll be referring back to it from time to time just to explain some of the things that we have witnessed or helped people with. So I said I'd start with areas around protecting the core. So the first 3 strategies in this are really about stabilizing and protecting the core. If you don't have a really well operating core to your business, making lots of changes and introducing new things and heading to digitalization, you're just building on quicksand, really. So these 3 areas around that. The first one is really around making sure that all of the efforts of the people that are with you are adding value, that we make sure we can see any opportunities for waste or misaligned effort, and we're doing something about that. The second is really about setting up to make sure things are getting better every day, small improvements. We talk about that. And then making the processes very consistent. We'd use the word standardization, but that is very, very necessary, particularly where there are new employees coming in or people having to be reallocated because of scarce resources. So let's start with the first of those. Saving wasted effort. I'll call this cut the clutter. I come from a kind of a lean background and have worked around lean for a long time. And we talk all the time about value adding and really understanding which of our activities add value and which of them don't add value, or in our language, there's wastes. And they can be anything from people walking around looking for things, meetings that people quite don't know how to behave at meetings, so the meetings can go on for a long time and they become griping sessions rather than action-orientated, vibrant places to get decisions made. So how do people add value? sometimes we'd ask the question, would the customer be willing to pay for that particular activity we're observing? Um, and we've a real life example here that could just as easily be Brightworks. Client of ours was making parts for the aviation industry, and a particular production area really hadn't been looked at in years. But when one of my colleagues helped them to look at it with this kind of looking for waste and opportunities to improve and standardize the process, they reduced the labor required in that production area from 5 people to 2 people. That's a 60% improvement just by going there and observing the work and figuring out which parts of the work were just transporting things that could be done with simple pieces of conveyor, which part could be done faster if we move things together, what parts were checks that weren't needed to be done. Now, the client is absolutely over the moon about what they were able to achieve with that and looking for more. It was that simple in that case. It's not always that easy and the prizes aren't that big. But if you just go and look at where the bulk of the work is being done and literally stop and spend long enough to observe what's really going on, it's not a quick look to see, oh yeah, I understand the tasks. It's just observing without being oppressive, observing what's happening in the area and doing something about it makes a huge difference. So looking for those opportunities is the first thing. Sorry, I skipped there by mistake. The next thing I want to talk about is tweaking processes. Every day, if a little change is made, it can make a big difference. So there are a lot of movements that have happened in Lean in the last 10 years that I think are very relevant for exactly this problem. And therefore, we talk about 2-minute Lean, where people set up to make lots of small improvements every day, and they really encourage the whole workforce to help themselves, to find opportunities to make their work a little bit better. It can be organizing around photocopiers. It can be just organizing the stationery, making things easier like that, labeling things very well, signposting things very well, all helps people. So tweaking things and setting up, in Lean, we call it a Kaizen event, but small tweaks can make huge returns. If you found a task that was done repeatedly, maybe 20 times a day, and you could shave 5 minutes off it, that would give you 400 hours over a year, or 10 weeks of somebody, quarter of somebody's time, or a fifth of somebody's time. And they're the kind of things we're looking for. And then the third thing in processes that I want to talk about is consistency, standardizing things. Now, this seems like a bit of drudge work, but if processes are highly standardized and it's obvious how they should be done and it's repeatable, then it's very easy for people to learn how to do it, very easy to check if we're getting consistency or what kind of problems we're having in the process. And what that leads to is a very agile and effective process and workforce. So it seems like it's counterintuitive, but standardizing and making it clear how things should be done are a solution that can give dividends immediately. So the second area I want to talk about is making work visible. So if we have the core processes pretty well understood, we can make sure that they are delivering very effectively, but most importantly, we can do something about it because we can see what the performance is. A US Supreme Court Justice, he was called Louis Brandeis, said that sunlight is the best disinfectant. And that's what we think about. If you can see what's meant to be going on in the process and you can see how it's performing, then you can do something about it. And that's easy enough to do. And we'd encourage it to be done with whiteboards or whatever. Or if you have digital ways of measuring the equipment, by all means use those. We don't want anybody to be going backwards. But the collaboration that's enabled by people recording their information and discussing it around a whiteboard or the likes is very, very empowering. So measuring what matters is very, very important here. So on this area, I wanted to mention 2 things in particular. Making sure that you have KPIs for the business and each area of work has its own performance indicators or key performance indicators. that are a good reflection on the progress of the work in the area. And this applies to every area of the business. Finance and HR and the likes aren't immune from this. They can still protect GDPR and the company secrets, if you like, and measure the performance and make the performance visible. But good KPIs that are cascaded from what the business is trying to achieve into each department, and making sure that it's focusing on those things that are important and not focusing on everything else, is very, very helpful. It keeps everybody focused. But there's a second one that's just as important when you're measuring. There's an awful lot of change going on at the moment, and you need to have a very good way of making that change visible. And we like to talk about that change as being objectives with key results. Each piece of change that you need to do in the organization needs to be named as a clear objective, and we need to know what result we will expect when that change has happened. We can then go and treat it like a project and make it very visible, again with whiteboards or with the tools that are available to us, and manage that. Have we done the actions we needed to do by now? And do we know what actions need to be done next, and who's doing them, and what's the progress? That's becoming more and more important. So you need to have both visible, the KPIs and the objectives and key results of the business. And those OKRs are becoming more and more important as the change speeds up, and coordinating people around that change becomes more and more important. So the second thing here on the performance there is, again, it's back to the point, like the whiteboards and the tools. If people see it and discuss it, they can fix it. And we really need to make sure that that visibility is there in all the work. Now, I would encourage an organization to make sure that these boards are highly visible, and that they are part of an organization where people walk around and interrogate the boards, not just have a look at them on a routine on their own, but there's a routine where people congregate and see what's going on and what are they doing to fix it. That gets real performance in the organization. And then the last thing around the visibility, production manager said to me a couple of months ago that he thought his CEO could see around corners, that she just knew what the problems were a couple of weeks before he did. And really, all she was doing was she was thinking about the risks that were coming at the business, and wondering. She herself wasn't doing it formally, but what she was doing really is predicting, if something happened, what do we do about it? And she could feel the things that were going to become problems. I'd suggest it can be a little more formal than that, but I don't want to make it sound like it's too big a deal, but it's effectively a form of risk management. Pick out the 6 or 7 risks that are coming at your business or already happening it. What if we don't have enough employees? What if a key person leaves? What if we had a breach of our IT systems? What if a client reshored their product to the US and we lost a big client? And really, if we named just 5 or 6 of the biggest risks, now these are practical risks. I'm not talking about volcanoes and hurricanes and things like that. Practical things that if you just stopped and thought about it, could affect your business. And you just categorize them under how severe are they if they happen, what's the likelihood of them happening, and what's the difficulty of doing something about it. And if it's scoring high or medium on 2 or 3 of those things, you need to know what you're going to do about it when it happens. And it's just being a bit ahead of it. Now, I'm suggesting keep that simple. These can get very elaborate with all sorts of scoring systems, but I wouldn't get any more elaborate than taking the top 5 or 6 and making sure I have contingencies for them. In all likelihood, that suite of contingencies will cover most of the things that are likely to happen to you. But it's a very useful thing to do to be able to react. And in this case, I'm suggesting, if you lost a number of your direct employees that touch the product or service, or if you lost a key person, or you lost a key client or a key market due to tariffs, what would you do about it? Just at that level, and that should help. I'm going to hand you over to Mark now for a couple of minutes to talk about the working smarter with the technology, if that's okay. Mark?
Thanks, Gene, and welcome again to everybody who's joined us today. Just looking at this image again and hoping that I don't scare people off as a start. But what I want to do today is to really work through some of the opportunities that we have in front of us when we are short-staffed or have constraints around our people to do more with the technology that's available to us, but more readily available, right? So it does not need to be AI being the buzzword at the moment, or big technological or capital investment changes. What can we do to take those repetitive tasks out of our day to release our people to higher value work, or to do more with the less people that we have in the organization? So this image is really about somebody doing more with what we have. And this idea here that once we have, I suppose, consistent processes and visibility around the work that needs to be done, what can we do with the technology that's available to us? So advances in technology look, they're rapidly turning up the dial on the pace of change in the way in which we work. This refers to the supports and tools available to complete work in a more efficient manner beyond what we've become so comfortable and accustomed to. So as Gene said, once we have clear visibility of the work that needs to be done and the performance in the organization, and we've stabilized the core processes to be consistent, we can really start to take advantage of tech opportunities in our organization and support us doing more with less people. So just on this slide here, when teams are short-staffed, look, every hour counts. Too often we get tied up with the low-value, repetitive tasks, manual data entry, routine reporting, scheduling. These drain energy could be used for higher impact work in your organization. The key here I want you to think about is really to identify opportunities to automate where possible. And again, this doesn't necessarily mean expensive robotics or AI projects. Just another example here in the image we have, taking something that's repetitive, has to be done quite a lot, but is maybe lower value work, taking that out of your day-to-day to really release these people to higher value work. So start small. Look, use workflow tools for approvals, like in Teams, Microsoft Teams. You could set up to use simple templates for order tracking, or deploy something simple around your scheduling software in your organization. And again, as Gene said, shaving small amounts of time on repeat tasks here is really what I want people to take away from this today. It's not the silver bullet or the brand new system that's going to do everything for us. This is about taking out that repeat or marginal gains that we can get out of our repetitive data. So if we go back to our example, Brightworks, that we spoke about, and an example that we had, a live example with a client of ours, Brightworks, if you take it that they had an accounts payable team of 2 people plus 1 finance manager involved in the processing and approval of invoice payments each month. So if this team processes an average of 400 invoices per month, posting them to their accounting package Sage, where they got approved for payment, there's a payment run created, uploaded to the banking system, the bank was approved, and that was paid. So this would be a typical or standard operation we'd see in accounts payable team across the suite of our clients that we work with. So fairly standard process. So the average timing that we worked out with the organization was 15 minutes per invoice to process. That includes the rechecks and issues that they had to go back to clients with and get clarifications on. So that turned out to be 6,000 minutes, 100 hours, or 12 and a half days in the month that organization was spending. So more than half of an individual's time in a month, if you take it with 20 working days, was actually put down to this processing of in. So what we did was, and what we got to look at the organization, was a rollout of a simple piece of software that plugged into their accounting package that allowed them to eliminate a huge portion of the manual entry by scanning invoices and picking up on the detail they needed. So it brought that processing time from 15 minutes per invoice down to just 10 minutes per invoice on average. So all told, that reduced it to 66 hours or just over 8 days. It's a 33% saving per month, or 50 days in the year. And that's just a simple change to that process, which is common across many organizations that we work with. And that's just a small change to that process. There's more that they want to keep looking at, but that's a huge amount of time and cost saving back, especially in this kind of constraints that we're talking about at the moment. So in this area, what I would ask people to do, or where to start with, without that silver bullet big system, is really just thinking about, in your own team's day to day, what's one task that feels repetitive or manual, could maybe be automated? How much time do you think might be lost each week to small repetitive tasks in your team? Or has anybody already implemented a small automation or change that freed up capacity? What was the impact of that to your team? And to try and measure that and see, could we repeat or look for more opportunities to do that? So, Jean, if you just move to the next slide. So again, on an image here, just around the current systems that we have, around integration and optimizing the systems that you have in your organization to really, as you can see there, eliminate double handling and wasted clicks in your organization, or wasted time spent interacting with your systems and your processes. So we see another common bottleneck comes from disconnected systems in organizations. So staff spending time hunting for information, re-entering data on more than one system or an Excel sheet, or reconciling a mismatch report. If you think about it, your systems like people in your organization, if you have to go to more than one system to try and get the picture of what the reality is, or get data from different systems to piece together what you need to make a decision, that's effectively the same as going to speak to somebody and ask them for their opinion or their thoughts on something, and speak to another person, get another bit of information. And the more systems in your organization, the more people you have to go and speak to, the more people you need to clarify this information with before you can make a decision. So what I'm trying to get at here is really about getting a single picture or one plan, or everybody aligned as to, this is the data that we need to drive our decision making in the organization, and really empower those quick decision makings when we have uncertainty, as Gina said, coming at us on a day-to-day basis, or shortages in staff that you can't go to ask these questions of. We need to be able to see this picture clearly, visibly, and as live as possible. So we've seen a lot of wasted effort in this, but it's very often hidden among back office processes and functions that are not as visible in the workplace. So again, have a think about those questions and the tasks in your own operation. Leaders in organizations can help by integrating these core systems. So if it's finance, HR, operations, sales, to try and get this single picture across the organization. So just and equally as important is optimizing what's already in place. So can you ask yourself the question, are we using the full capacity of a tool that we have in the organization? Again, try and avoid that looking outside for the silver bullet. Can we use what we have already to greater capacity and get the most out of it? A common opportunity we've identified with a lot of organizations in this area is the use of simple tools that are available through your own Microsoft or Google licenses, which you already pay for, but people are either not aware of or they're underutilized. Actually, to a point that I read a Microsoft report recently that stated that around 60% of Microsoft licenses are either completely unused or completely underused. There's less than 20% of the application use. So that's anything above your PowerPoint, Microsoft Excel, Word. Okay. So again, I just want people to ask yourself the question, how many different systems do you or your team log into daily? Right? Is there a way that we can cut down on this or get a single picture to drive that decision making? Where do you see the most duplication of effort in your organization? You having to go in and out of SharePoint and different files to look for information? And finally, if there are two systems you could join together to get a single picture, maybe it's, clock in system in the morning when people come in to do their job, and your HR system, right? Two simple ones that should be speaking to one another to know who's in the building at any given time. Simple ones that we could look at for your organization. So just to close out on that, look, integration really reduces duplication, errors, and frustration, while optimizing what you have gets the most from the tools that you're already paying for. And these are the kind of areas we would try to just eke out those marginal gains in your organization. So I'll hand you back to Jean to just have a chat through the people. And again, thanks for your time.
Thanks, Mark. So good news, I suppose, is that technology and innovation will continue to drive our economies and our businesses. Like, we're going to have more and more of this change happening all the time. It'll be accelerating. And the attitude to change, and particularly to education, will be the hallmarks of good organizations and good people of the future. So there's another phrase attributed to Henry Ford. That's the only thing worse than training your employees and having them leave is not training them and having them stay. Now, I really, really believe that that is true. And if you look at some of the people that have been very successful, like Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates, Oprah Winfrey, they talk about the amount of their time that they invest in educating themselves. Now, I don't mean scrolling. I mean educating themselves, where they have decided to learn something new or something that's happening that they're not familiar with. It could be gene splitting or whatever else, or it could be something that's more applied to the business. In my case, I could no longer ignore AI and what's really going on. I kind of understood it was something that was way better than search. But I'm doing a free online course at the moment called Elements of AI. You can look it up on elementsofai.com. It's Helsinki University and UCC, I believe, but really interesting. But it's challenging me to really think and concentrate on some of the concepts and what it's going to mean into the future. I really feel I have to learn the core of what's going on there, because it's going to impact on so much of what happens. I'm also signed up on a Coursera course, which is a little more complicated, and I'll see how I do on that. There's an exam you'll pass at the end of that. But I think it's very, very important that you think about making sure that you are hiring the best people, and that they are people that are open, people that are collaborating to make the organization successful into the future, are open, and they're acquisitive of knowledge, and they are natural problem solvers. So they don't have a fixed growth mindset, they have a growth mindset. And just because somebody's at a senior level today doesn't mean that they're thinking right about the future. So think deeper into the organizations, because there will be lots of bright people. If you just think about them differently, you'll see that they'll be able to help with a lot more of the heavy lifting into the future. But I think it's very, very important that you think about people very differently, because if they're learning and developing, then they're probably adding to their skill set by 20 or 30% per annum, versus somebody who's just doing what they always did and going through the routines. So spot those people that are learning and coming up with new ideas and have that growth mindset, and pluck them out of anonymity, if I could call it that, and get them to help with some of these problems and help you with some of the solutions for them. So I think that's the ninth one. And then the last one I want to talk about is flexibility in an organization. There's a word that's bandied about. It comes from the software world. People talk about agile organization sometimes, and it feels like, well, you have to understand this agile manifesto, and there's some books about it. But really, the hallmarks of an agile organization are, where strategy is concerned, they've really figured out what their North Star is, what's really important, what the purpose of the organization is. And they've made sure that everybody in the organization is really well connected to that, whether that's through their internal marketing and a bit of their branding and external marketing, or whether it's through having very clear objectives and measurements of those, and some town halls or meetings to let people know what's going on. But agile organizations make sure that everybody knows where the organization is going and where they within it are going. The second thing that's a hallmark of these agile organizations is structures. Now, again, a bit like the standardization earlier, it sounds like a contradiction, but where the structures and the roles and responsibilities are clearly articulated and communicated, everybody is empowered to do their job better. Where there's uncertainty in changing responsibilities, or who's filling the gaps left by people, that's when the structures start to break down and mistakes start to happen. So these organizations that are agile have flatter structures. It's inevitable these days that you can't have all the layers of managers and middle managers. Organizations can't afford it, but the speed at which decisions and communications happen in those taller organizations aren't fit for modern organizations. So they have to be flatter. People have to know more, and they have to be very clear and black and white about what's required. So networks of empowered teams is what is the hallmark of these well-structured agile companies. They have, again, well-structured processes to enable rapid decision-making at an appropriate level in the organization. We should have as few decisions percolating up for senior people to deal with. More and more processes should be empowered to make decisions, or the huddles that check on the performance of the processes is where decisions should get made. And we should be giving people very good frameworks to make the decisions in, rather than allowing the decisions to percolate up in an organization. Those are the hallmarks of good processes, and they have rapid experimenting and changing. Let's try something different. We can always put it back if it doesn't work. They've standardized ways of working, and they have this performance orientation. They're checking to see how they're doing all the time. And I mentioned earlier the action orientation. With the people, it really needs to be a like-minded community. It's amazing how one naysayer or one person that's dug in the past and won't let go of old practice and things will stymie a whole group of people that are willing to go forward. So it behoves the leadership, and again, it's a hallmark of these agile organizations, that they have really good collaboration, and they have energy in their meetings and their discussions, and they enjoy each other's company. Going to a meeting feels like a good thing, not there's an hour I'll never get back kind of a problem. And finally, they're always embracing the technology. They're never falling too far behind in revs of their software or their systems, and because that technical deficit will catch up sooner or later. So they always have an eye for the more modern technology. But how nimble an organization and its structure is doesn't come without deliberate discussion and structure being put in place by the leadership of the organization, and regular review of have we got our best people in the best places for all the battles and things we have to do. So those are the 10 things that we think can help where we can't get our hands on enough people, or the budget won't allow us. We need to make sure we have the right people. But what I'm going to do, sorry, beg your pardon, I skipped a few slides there. I'm going to ask Grania, who's helping in the background here, to set up a poll there. I think, would you be able to do that now, Grania?
Yeah, it should be popping up for everyone now.
So what I'm going to ask you is, if you were to make a start, if you were to pick one of those things and you're going to start on it, which one would that be? Now, I'd encourage you to think about it even today as much as possible. But if you were to pick one of those, would you vote for it? In return, then, what we would suggest we will do is we'll send you some pointers as to how we would think about that particular thing that you're thinking of to embark on. And we'd offer, if you'd like any bit of help, get in touch and we'll get on a call with you and talk to you about how we'd approach it. So I'd ask you just to vote and pick one so that we'll know who to send the emails to or whatever, and what you're thinking of doing in the next minute or two. And then Grania will tell us just what are the things that are exercising people the most. And as I said, we'll send out those emails. We'll also send you the recording of today so that you have it if you want it, or a link to the recording, and the deck that Mark and I were using just to prompt you. And I think Grania will have a little bit of the text of what we went through just to remind you if that's useful. So I'm just going to open up for a couple of questions while you're filling out that survey. I'm not going to submit one, Grania, so I don't know how I just exit off my screen.
Yeah, okay. So I suppose at the minute, just for out of interest for everyone, we're currently at about 13 responses in, and there's a good spread across the data, but measure what matters and staying nimble are the front runners at the moment. I suppose maybe to kick off the Q&A, one question that I have for Eugene is if you are, I suppose, the CEO of Brightworks initially, what's the one thing you would do first? You know, if you said you wouldn't vote, but if you were to vote, what's your number one?
If I was to vote, I would be right back there at number one. I would go to where most of the work gets done. So if I was running a bus company, I'd go to the depot where the buses go out and come back from, or whatever, you know, where I think the most of the work happens and most of the opportunity is. If it was a manufacturing company, it would be right down where most of the people are in the production areas or the testing areas. If it was a service company that had call center types, it's there. If it was like an engineering company, I'd be looking at what an engineer or an architect is drawing or working on. And I would get myself as close as possible to that so that I could observe. And this wouldn't be a quick look. This would be, I'd spend a couple of hours. I tried to shrink myself down to be as unnoticed as possible. And I would just be observing what's stopping that person doing that work much better. Where do they spend most of their time? What little aids or tools would help them? Do they know what their performance is? So I would really be back there on that. Cut the clutter, I would call it, but it's in lean language, we go back to Tim Woods, which is our acronym for waste. I'd be looking for parts being moved about the place under transport, inventory that shouldn't be there, motion, unnecessary motion that people are doing, and a number of other kind of opportunities to eliminate what we call waste. I think that's a really rich and a place that you can go to immediately, and is very empowering to solve a number of problems. But you have to go with a supportive mindset on. It can't be, why are you doing this wrong or why are you doing that wrong? It has to be, how do I help them do more with less? That's where I'd go first.
Great, thank you. Do we have any other questions or thoughts? Okay, well, if anything comes up, if anyone has, oh, sorry, Brian, you have your hand up there.
Yeah, thanks a million, everyone. Not a question as such, a lot of notes here to read, get back through. Just want to say thanks. Thanks to Jean and Mark, really enjoyed that. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Brian. And look,
Thanks,
even if there aren't questions here, as I said, Mark and I are very happy to be available and to talk to anybody if they're saying, you know, I was wondering if, and whatever, you know, you can explore it a little bit, but really, more than anything, I see, like, we are in a predicament right now in Ireland, but it's an opportunity that we're going to have to grasp, or we'll be kicking and screaming into it because labour will just get too costly for everybody. It's happening all around us, and the cost of living is going up. So we're going to have to become like a Switzerland or a Japan of old and really embrace the technologies and this kind of organisation standardization so that we can continue to enjoy the wealth that's been created in the country. So I'd just like to finish by thanking you all for taking your time. I hope it was of some use. I know there's nothing radical and new in this, but they are very practical, I hope, and things that you could apply immediately. So thank you very much from me and from the team here.
Thanks again, all. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Jean. Thank you.
Thanks a million. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
Very much.
Thank you.